alumni, student, and Breg Horemans from TAAT Collective. And now I will pass a microphone to Pavlos, who will introduce them and the lecture.
Thanks a lot, and welcome everybody. I want to congratulate all the department and friends with these 2 lively weeks and all the kind of buzz in the air. So yes, would like to welcome today TAAT Collective, which is presented by Goda and Breg tonight. I'm gonna briefly present the collective, the speakers, and also a little bit of what you are about to hear. So TAAT is a transdisciplinary arts collective bringing together artists, designers, and other professionals and non-professionals to share, explore, and develop ideas around regenerative art and embodied encounters between humans and more than humans. TAAT is a regenerative practice that shifts between artistic research, social practice, and collaborative learning. It is currently growing in encounters portals, which is bioorganic structures that are based on and contribute to the regenerative multi-species coexistence. These are part of the long-term project Whole 33, which facilitates encounters between humans, more than humans, institutions, research, and education, and has unfolded as a rehearsals through space from 2012 until now. I encourage you to also visit TAAT's website, and TAAT is TAAT.live. I think there's a lot of interesting projects and gestures there, so I think that illustrates well. So Goda, as mentioned by Laura, is an alumni student from this very department. She's a Lithuanian spatial designer, currently lives in Hague in Netherlands. Her work stretches between architectural, regenerative, and speculative design practices. And after obtaining her master's degrees from Royal Academy of Arts in The Hague, she started working as an interior architect and Doppelstrijkers, I'm sorry for pronunciation, studio. And along that, she also is developing her own artistic practice by collaborating with TAAT Collective. In 2020, Goda also co-initiated neo-futuristic walks as laboratory for walking and speculative storytelling, so maybe there's some of you who also participated because there were some events also happening here, as far as I know. Yes, this project traveled multiple cities and has been presented in various design festivals. And Goda also has led some studios and workshops at the Rotterdam Academy of Architecture and Urban Design, Vilnius Tech University, and Royal Academy of Arts in Hague. Breg is a PhD candidate at KU Leuven, Faculty of Architecture in Belgium, and a member of Regenerative Architecture, Arts and Design Research Group. As artistic practice-based researcher, he co-founded a TAAT Collective together with Gert-Jan Stam. Again, I'm sorry for pronunciation. That happened from 2012 onwards. He holds a postgraduate degree in curating and worked as a curator in architecture and urbanism at Schnuck in Heerlen. And since 2018, he's affiliated with KU Leuven as a practice-based lecturer and master dissertation mentor. And he's a guest lecturer at University of Arts in London, Aberystwyth University, Yildiz Technical University, and Vilnius Tech University as well. So, very briefly, you are going to hear the presentation, which will take 40 up to perhaps to an hour, which is called Architectures of Attention, where designers are often trained to develop a project from conception to execution in a linear, forward-looking manner. Since the global pandemic, the practice of TAAT Arts Collective is slowly shifting from an A to B attitude towards an eco-dramaturgical approach, cyclical, seasonal, ecological. This approach aims to consider raw materials extracted from natural environments as more than human entities with whom we can collaborate. The aim of presentation is to share gestures of making that are sensitive and responsive in order to shift our ways of thinking, doing, being in spatial design. So please very welcome, Goda and Breg. Thank you. Work? Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Labadiena. It's not very loud.
Now it's working.
It's working. Great. Yeah, so we are Breg and Goda. Thanks for having us here tonight at the Academy of Arts in Vilnius, where, I mean, I think it's the first time that we were actually at the academy, at least me, Goda, of course not.
Yeah, I studied here. I graduated 9 years ago. So it's a big pleasure to be invited to come back in a bit different role this time, but as exciting.
Yeah, and for me the same, very exciting. It's also, I think, the fourth time that we're in Vilnius for the Blackberry project, or the project that we're doing on Blackberry Island, which is now called Hazelnut Island. So it's always nice to kind of come into this rhythmical approach of engaging to locality and to the place where we work. Oh, there's also a very nice typo in the date. We're not in the 13th month, but in the 9th. So the presentation tonight, we're going to focus on the link between what architecture means in our practice and what performance means, and how we approach the practice as a kind of dramaturgical practice. Then we're going to focus also on how we collaborate with more than human entities, from rivers to willow to all sorts of different actors in an ecology. And we're going to talk a bit about the project and the workshop that we're going to do in the coming days with students from the faculty here.
And maybe just to mention that we called this workshop Architectures of Attention, and also all these projects we have done, and you will see today, they are also projects of attention, I think, in architecture field and design field, and they represent still quite a variety of different ways of how showing this attention to our environment, to existing architecture, to new architecture, and also to natural environment which surrounds us.
Yeah, and also in a time where design processes need to go quick and are very sort of result-oriented and kind of go from A to B. You go to a site, you take pictures, you go home, and you start designing, and then, I don't know, it's like we're ready to build or something. I mean, in a lot of cases it doesn't go like that either. But I think, yeah, what we're trying to make a plea for is for a design process that is really about a sort of embodied engagement with site and with place and with people.
I think Paul has presented us quite well, so I don't think we need to talk more about our biographies or something, but maybe it's interesting for you to mention how I started working with TAAT Collective, because TAAT Collective formed a bit earlier. I don't know exactly which year you started working.
2012.
Yeah, so I think I had a first project with TAAT in 2016. It was during my MA. As a part of my MA program, I had the chance to work with TAAT Collective, and it was really special. It was somehow really touched me, that experience. And then I continued working with them, and even after graduation I did another project and another, and now we're also here in Lithuania where I did my bachelor, and I'm standing here with Breg from TAAT, so I think it's the cycle. It's really beautiful and quite important in my own development as a designer or as an architect.
And I'm also very happy to stand here next to Goda. This is almost like we're getting into a romantic mode already, but exactly. This is not what we're doing. So the picture that you see here is an installation called Hall 5 in Ghent, where we first met. Okay, this is getting weirder now. And so, which is basically a wooden installation for two strangers to go through different scenes together and to come into an embodied experience with each other and with the spatial design. We'll talk about that in a minute. And here, this is a picture on Hazelnut Island. I think it was taken about 3 years ago. And here we are engaged in a moment of arriving on the island in a silent meditation, where we performed a little ritual to ask for permission to be on the island. Sounds a little bit abstract maybe, which it is, and at the same time it's also very touching to say, okay, this place where we come to is something that we need to respect and need to at least try to kind of understand in its own language or through its very genuine signals.
Maybe also just to mention that these two pictures, they kind of also represent a bit the development or the change of that collective. And the previous picture you saw more of a wooden structure, and it's a bit maybe usual material architects work with. And then in the second picture, it's also another TAAT project, but you see that there is another tree, also another, the tree from which the wood is made, let's say. But we are now moving towards a bit different direction, and throughout this presentation, you will see this change.
So a shift of perspective and a shift of attention towards the more than human, you could say. So this is a sort of very short version of the project until now. So in 2012 we started with a long-term project called Hall 33. I won't go deeper on why this is named like this, but the main idea there was to make a building that was a theater play. So to really take this idea of performance into, let's say, the sphere of architecture by creating a pavilion where people went through into different phases, and the architectural experience was the performance. Then in 2014 we did more of a kind of community building project called Core 2, which was about, which revolved around the question, when do we construct or how do we construct a community? We'll get into that later on. And then from that moment, Hall 1 to 12 in different countries in Europe kind of started developing. And in 2015, we did a project called Sengu in an open air museum, where a big shift happened. There we were invited to work with wood that was actually grown in an open air museum in Belgium, and we did a little ritual to cut the trees, and this had a quite profound impact in how we were looking at more than human entities, formerly called resources. And then we started making these encounter portals, which was a series of growing architectures, which is still ongoing. And recently we started up a project in Uganda. We went there for the first time, which we will briefly talk about.
This is the first project, Hall 5. It's a project out of 6 other projects which TAAT worked on by using the same wooden structure. The structure was moved from one city to another, and in each city TAAT was working with a group of different people, sometimes students, sometimes maybe other, I don't know, artists or other participants, and they were building these installations which were creating certain spatial conditions for two people, two strangers, to meet on different levels. And then they were also approaching it from different senses. So one installation focused on, let's say, sight, another installation focused on smell. The Hall 5 in Ghent, in Belgium, was built in this medieval church. So one thing, of course, was very important was how this new structure interacted with the environment, and another thing was what was happening inside the installation. And this Hall 5 focused on the sense of touch. So in 2 weeks we were developing different situations, how the sense of touch could be enhanced, and also how the sense of touch could be approached by two strangers entering the same space but from different sides. And what was very powerful in during the creative process of this installation was that we had a workshop with a choreographer who was blind, and he was really teaching us how to use touch in architecture and spatial design, and really isolate the sites. So we were doing a lot of practice with him, and the outcome, I think, was quite a beautiful experiential space, which was presented during Hand Design Biennale, and many people visited, many people had different experiences in that space. But of course, still in this installation, we were still quite far from where we are now with that, and it was really thinking about what can we do with materials, what kind of spaces can we create, but we didn't really have this deeper connection to wood as a material or the source. Where does that come from, you know, and what did we do with it, and how was it produced? And so I think this understanding started to coming in bit by bit during the next projects of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a couple of pictures more from how the installation started. So you would have like one person on one side, one on the other, somebody, an usher, somebody that would present the installation to the audience and then invite them inside so they wouldn't see each other, and then they would go through this series of spaces. Yeah.
This is actually another project, but we will start from a little video. And I think I can just talk over a bit, no? So this is a project in Latvia, in Riga. It was part of a festival school. It was a Homo Novus festival of contemporary theater. And we gathered a group of people, and we worked also for 2 weeks in an abandoned school building. And the idea was to create a route throughout the building and engage with the building on different levels and create an experience for festival participants. But how can they interact with the building, but also how they can interact with each other? So it was again a walk through the building shared between two strangers. And you see here a little bit more of workshops and the preparation and creative process moments. So we thought that this project is actually a nice project to add to the presentation, talking about architectures of attention, because we were working on different ideas. What can we do? How can we approach this abandoned school, which is very rich and very layered and gathers so much of historical facts and different experiences and memories and so much. And when we decided that we will focus on the care of the building, so the spaces we chose to walk through, part of it we really cleaned. So that was actually the idea, so really taking care of a school building. So we started cleaning the floor or the windows or bits of the building to really show some care and attention to that building. And by using a line, we walked through that building, and then we created a path for two strangers. And of course it was accompanied with the score or the script, which was given to the people before they entered the installation. So yeah, you still see some bits of the process.
Continuing a little bit. So yeah, as Goda said, this building was in a kind of deteriorated state. So it was empty for a long time. Oh, it's not playing. So what we noticed in developing this route for two people throughout the building is that we wanted to show the building in that state of deterioration, but also to show the beautiful parts of it. So people went in first into the basement, where everything was sort of moldy and dirty, and at the first day we found a dead cat in there. So there was this kind of atmosphere of decay. And then you went sort of up. This is the beginning scene where people were walking around, and then at the end coming to the entrance. Let's go to the pictures, maybe that's easier. Oops. So that looked like this.
Yeah, so this was a first step before entering the building, and then part of it was really a ruin, which was also in a way beautiful, but kind of dramatic as well, with this natural light falling into the building, and we were actually looking at the building as a sort of theater piece, theater stage, or also some kind of life organism in a way, because yeah, as I said before, every story, every staircase had some kind of story behind it, and it was also an old school building, so of course a lot of people pass by these corridors and basements and attics, so it was also a gift for us for 2 weeks to really have a full kind of space to explore. You know, we could go through the whole building, and which doesn't happen that often in the abandoned buildings when I think artists work. So, and it was also some shots are taken already from the walk during the festival. Then two people, and we created this different states of dramaturgy throughout the building. So in some places you would come with a stranger really close to each other and really face each other. In other spaces you would sit a bit in a distance of 3 meters, and sometimes you would see only each other's back or a shadow or something. So it was also a little bit of fluctuating dramaturgy of intensity and also a bit more mellow parts of a walk.
And everything in silence, so that also created quite some tension. Yeah, then the project that I introduced in the beginning, that was about building communities, that was this one, Core 2. So you see a group of people constructing the pavilion. So this was about 16 tons of wood that through the hard work of about 16 volunteers were constructing it in one day. So you see here a couple of kids that were assisting in reading the manual and doing it in a kind of miniature version. So it was operated in 3 phases. Build a wooden pavilion in one day, then do a theater play together, which was also operated by a script. And then thirdly, there was a program that was about sharing passions, visions about community building, issues that were at stake in a certain community that would get resolved in a participatory approach. So this is how the manual looked like. So you had like 43 drawings, and people basically had to find the right number and put it on the right place. Then the play operated by a second instruction, which was very much a sort of social choreography, where people were taking different positions in the pavilion on community building. For instance, the question was raised, what is more important, the individual or the community when you take an important decision? And then people would go left to the pavilion, stand there, versus the people that had another opinion. In 2015, we did a project in the Open Air Museum of Bokrijk on crafts, on working with wood, as we already had some experience with working with wood. So the only difference there was that we were invited to cut 5 old trees that were all, they had some diseases, so they needed to be cut anyways. And we decided to ask 5 designers from Holland and Belgium to go into a series of 5 workshop weekends where we would decide on a specific way of cutting and assembling the building into a building kit. And then after that time, the pavilion would be ready for the audience members of the Open Air Museum to make their own pavilions with it. And as you can see, there is, it's maybe not super clear. Yeah, maybe it is. So there is 2 fields. So there's a kind of field that is built and a field that is empty. And the process would be that every month or so, people would deconstruct one side to rebuild on the other field and vice versa. And the name Sengu, probably some of you know, is derived from a Japanese temple ritual where every 30 years or 60 years, depending on the temple, they redo a whole temple. So all the detailing, all the woodwork, all the clothes for the rituals are remade with the idea that the knowledge has to be passed on from generation to generation in order to preserve also the, let's say, the performative part of the project, not only the artifact. And then we also did another hall 7 in the Latvian woods. I think we're gonna go to a little clip as well. And there, it's in Akniste, not so far from here, actually, in the south of Latvia. And there, the festival director, who, he proposed us to work with peat, because peat is a local material, came from a sort of local field, and they had plenty of it, which was for us, I mean, it's already a little bit problematic because it's an extractive landscape, or a landscape of extraction that is then, or at least the material is being brought to Germany to become fertilizer, etc. But then, I mean, this is information that we didn't know at the time, or that we weren't very aware of. So we said yes, and we started constructing this parallel route for two strangers in the forest. And what was very rewarding there is that we really had the feeling that the building process was very much more in relation to the wooden structures, that was very much relating to the forest. So we needed to construct bending walls that would go from tree to tree in order to be stable, because otherwise these peat constructions would fall. And it felt much more of a grounding experience, both in the dialogue with the material, as in the dialogue with the location, and also with each other. And also here, at some point, we had a group of volunteers that were getting into the stone stacking. Oops. And I remember one moment, I mean, here it's sunny, because when it's sun you can film easier, but I think for 4 of the 5 days we were doing it in pouring rain. And at some point we were singing and like talking in the rain, and it was such a grounding experience also to be able to do that. And then, yeah, at the end we had every 10 to 15 minutes to audience members from the festival, which is a small festival on installation art and chamber music, that we led through the 2 corridors. So yeah, what also is something maybe to mention is that this project, if you compare this to the wooden works we did, suddenly introduces a very different aesthetics. I mean, me as a trained architect, I wasn't per se very enchanted by these kind of bricks that don't have really a shape, and it's kind of matte, and it's for me it was really a shift to making something with a material that has its own aesthetics, and like the way that you treat it the way it wants to get treated. And this is very different. I mean, with wood, I think you also have that until a certain extent, because it always bends a little bit and you have to change it, but it's always about, you're in this mode of controlling the material. And here it was really about stepping back and seeing what you could actually do with these very irregular forms. Yeah, then I added a couple of slides on the discourse on regeneration or regenerative design. Also because this is what I'm working on in the PhD that I'm currently doing at KU Leuven. And what I noticed in doing literature study on regenerative design, I mean, there's amazing work like this, for instance, from Space Caviar, which was actually part of an exhibition at the VAC in Venice in 2019. Where there's a strong plea for understanding better the locations where we extract all the material that we use in building cultures. And for instance, here the wall, what is it, onyx? Is it onyx, the stone? No, it's not. It doesn't matter. So there's a certain marble in the Barcelona pavilion, which is actually so disconnected from the original quarry or from the landscape of, through which the material kind of belonged, that we never actually asked that question on where does this material actually really come from, and is it actually okay to take it. So regenerative design, this is a scheme that is often used, is sort of the 2 steps further from sustainable design, what we've all been doing, I guess, since 20 years. And regenerative practices, according to this scheme, which is often used for the United Nations development discourse, etc., is about holistic thinking and natural system design thinking. But what does that mean, holistic thinking? For instance, if you look at a project like this from ARUP, the big design studio in Germany, then I think it's amazing that these panels that are in the facade are powered by algae. These algae are basically a huge actor in this building, in the livelihood of the building, in cooling the building down. And at the same time, you can ask, what is the actual agency of this algae? I mean, did anybody ask the algae if they want to be a facade panel, for example? Also here, I really like these projects of the growing architectures of Baubotanik and Ola architecture from the TU München. So the question, I think, the questions that are raised, like, can we make living architectures, and what are the new gestures of maintenance, of pruning, of planting that come with these kind of architectures? I think that's very crucial that we ask ourselves that. I visited the installation 2 months ago, and now it looks like this, which doesn't mean for me, that they maintained it badly. I mean, obviously they didn't maintain it, but this is also, I think, what is the beauty of it, that suddenly these birch trees that are used for the facades start speaking their own language, and they start doing what they want. And apparently the shape is not a tower anymore, but it becomes a kind of pear, you know? So that's interesting that these more than human entities, when you start working with them as co-designers, that they also start doing their own thing. Same for this is a very different example, which is also talked about in the book, Growing Architectures, the growing bridges of the Kazi tribe, which is very much a community thing. So these bridges are grown and made over generations and generations, and are also passed on from, so the knowledge is passed on from one generation to another, but also the physical thing needs to be cared for. And a very different approach, also at Biennale last year, the Peruvian pavilion, Walkers of the Amazonia, that were studying communities and asking them to make calendars for their artistic or for their spatial practices. So in which the design process is not so much an A to B thing, but actually much more of a cyclical way of working on site. We're taking it back to our practice. I put this in at the last minute when we were eating, and I don't remember what I wanted to say with it. I think this is just a structure of the different phases that we apply in a project.
Yeah, and in TAAT practice, but also in general, probably in many spatial practices, people try to go through certain steps until they reach some desired result. So for TAAT, it's of course, it's important to think how we approach the space where we work, how we arrive there, or how we enter the place, then what do we take from that place, what do we make there, how do we make there, then how do we feel our presence in the space, and the last step is always the reflection of what did we do there, and what went fine, what went wrong. And I think quite a nice example of it is also that previously showed project in Latvia, in Sanssouci Festival, because I think when TAAT worked on the installation by using peat, they didn't know the full information about peat excavation, so we did it with like lots of passion and also excitement. But when later we learned that, you know, by excavating peat you produce a lot of CO2, and then, you know, that project also became a little bit of problematic project within TAAT's portfolio, even though yeah, aesthetically or visually, it was some kind of new way of thinking, and for that was a important step in the practice. So I think for us in our practice is always important to critically reflect on what we are doing or what did we do in our previous projects.
Yeah, and then you also try to do it differently. Like, I mean, this is the last kind of full project we're talking about, and then I think we're going to the trajectory that we've been doing here. So this is I have the feeling that when I use the word project, it kind of bothers me more and more because I don't see it as, I mean, the projects are not projects anymore. It's kind of cyclical trajectories of repetition and engagement that are locally embedded. I think when you say project, it's almost like you already know beforehand what you're going to do, or it's kind of this literally the A/B logic, and then you just fill in the steps and you do it, which is very much the opposite what we're doing now. So the sort of the basic premise of these encounter portals that we're trying to figure out how to do them is this idea of planting a growing pavilion. And how we go about that now is to take a lot of time. So the project in Worcelaar has been running for about 3 years as well now. And a first gesture that we did when we arrived to the site was to do a plant meditation, which is something that comes from studies on perception, studies on plant intelligence. And we do this meditation. We're also going to do it on the island tomorrow, probably, to tune in with the perceptorium of a plant. Because we're going to make, or the idea is that we're making a growing installation. In this case, we're working a lot with willows, so it actually makes sense to step into the roots of the plant, literally and figuratively, to know how this other entity that has not a human perceptive system, how that operates in the world and how that relates to other beings. We always invite a biologist, for instance. Here was Jose, a local volunteer that explained us on the details of the willow. I won't go too deep in that. And then we do a lot of small, very intuitive prototyping sessions. Here you see Amandine, who is one of our team members, who felt a very intuitive feeling of lying down and basically weaving a kind of cocoon around her body with these willows. This is an excerpt from a video. What she says in the video is that for her it was a gesture of care towards the willow to kind of weave it together and somehow try to listen to how the willow operates in the ecosystem. And at the same time, it was a gesture of care for herself because she was lying down and making this cocoon around her body. So, I mean, not to say that we're now all going to make cocoons in the landscape, but it's an example of how a different position as a designer, literally, because you're lying down, and a different relation to these entities also changes a way of thinking design and doing design. We're very much in contact with the nature reserve organization that own the piece of land that we are working on. And they are very active in maintaining the forest. Here you see them ringing an American oak, because an American oak is a non-native species to the land. So the nature reserve people think that it needs to go because they want to go back to the sort of the original forest. And what's interesting about this image is that, I mean, for me it's quite an aggressive image, because you basically kill a tree and you basically kill it very slowly. But at the same gesture of cutting bark and taking off the bark is very much used in basket weaving, for instance, to split the sort of the material that you can use for as a kind of rib system for a basket, and the skin you can use to tie things. So it's a very it's the same gesture in a way, because you remove the bark, but the effect or the aesthetical effect or the position of this gesture in a bigger ecosystem changes. And what's particular about this spot, actually I forgot to tell you in the beginning, is that here you see the river A, And nature conservation organizations there, so this river actually got straightened out at some point for economical purposes. So it used to have a lot more meanders, so these turns in the river, and now the nature conservationists, they want to reopen the different meanders so that, for instance, fish can reproduce easier. So what happened in this area, exactly on the point where we proposed to plant our growing pavilion, is that they were making a meander, and that looks like this. So again, there is this huge gesture of taking something for the land, completely kind of, starting again. But here with the idea that you're actually in the long run contributing something to the ecology. So it's, I mean, just showing a couple of examples to open also the discussion about the ethics of our takings and our makings in a way when we design. And then, we did a couple of workshops with the community, so a lot of basket weaving, and the basket weaver Jani Bouwen, who is supporting us in the project. She's amazing. I already learned a lot from her. And we're now looking at a couple of prototypes. This is in Jani's garden, where we're trying to make a couple of columns of the pavilion. We don't know what the shape of the pavilion is going to be. We just knew that we wanted to work with willow. So now we're seeing how these how we can combine and make knots and react to how the willow grows in a sort of very slow, rhythmic and cyclical way. This is a couple of pictures from 1 month ago. We had some visitors here. There were some deers kind of touching upon our newly built structures. So this is also an actor that you need to take in account. And this is last week when I visited the structure. So one experiment was to make a sort of bigger column. We tied it up with dead willow, so we used a sort of basket weaving technique on living willow, and now we were just seeing the first results of the willow reacting to the pressure and to this bind. I think I'm gonna skip a bit Paradu project because I think we're going a bit over time. On our website we have a lot of information on every project, but we also have an archive. This is where we took the videos from. And next to our archive we have a series of what we call online agoras. And we're now going to take you to the live agora, which is a repository / presentation space on the Hall 9 project. So the growing pavilion on Blackberry Island, now called Hazelnut Island.
This is actually the place where we'll be working with students this week from tomorrow until Thursday. So for 3 days we will go to the Hazelnut Island, and this is not the first year when we are working on the project. We started in 2021. Kipras Dubauskas, artist, is curating the island as a total project, and he's creating there a park of sculptures and wild plants garden, and he invited us to take a part of it and also create an installation there. And we liked the idea from the beginning because we thought that it's very kind of relating his approach and our approach about regeneration, about a little bit more attentive, a little bit more sensitive way of approaching our natural environments. And Breg will show where the island is located, because I'm not sure if everyone from you knows. I see some students who listen to who attended today our introduction session, so they know quite a lot now about the place, but maybe some of you don't know much. So this is one of the islands in Neris River. It's close to Garūnai and close to Lazdinėliai. And it's an island which was partly naturally formed by the river, but majority of it was also formed by human. It was created from this quarry nearby. And the quarry, Garūnai quarry, one of the biggest quarries in Vilnius, it was used basically for production of sand was used for production of cement and prefab panels for mass housing districts like Lazdynai or Žirmūnai. So it's also interesting to think how the modern architecture, let's say, during Soviet time was formed by this excavation of sand or an extractive behavior towards the landscape. And then what is interesting that this island was big part of it, 80% of island was artificially formed by the sand. And why they did it? Because we wanted to slow down the river stream and to pump water back to the quarry to be able to excavate the sand. So with this idea in mind, at first actually when we started working on the island, we didn't know this. And when we got to know this, I think it changed a bit the perspective of it, but also it made it somehow more special for us to work on the island. And then, yeah, you can see here some pictures. Maybe you, Breg, can help me to travel a bit.
Yeah, I'll travel.
Because you're better in that. Yeah, and then we also did an art residence in Menų Spaustuvė, where we also worked on this ideas of regenerative architecture and how can we create new connections to non-human entities which are surrounding us in our natural environments. And then we also did several years, we did workshops on the island and approached it from different perspectives. So what Breg mentioned in For Solar project, we also did different gesturing activities like weaving or singing or also entering the island, talking to biologists, talking to... Oh, you want to play?
You wanna
I don't know. You can play a bit.
Yeah, okay. It's playing.
Okay.
So we sang a folk song, thanks to Goda, which was about a stone and a river.
Yeah, so it was a song about river and a stone. And the words go like upė teka, akmuo būna, tu tekėk kaip vanduo ir būk kaip akmuo, which translates that river flows and stone stays. You flow as a river and stay still as a stone. And it was also quite a beautiful message how it shaped our process on the island, because some days we really stayed there and really stayed long, did these plant meditations or other slow activities to understand what is happening on the island and how we as humans, how can we interact with this process and how can we take a part in it. Because in a way, when you think the island, you know, it's existing on its own, do we humans even need to go there and do something? But we kind of found importance in that, and also talking to biologists and also Kipras Dubauskas, we understood that there are quite a lot of invasive species which are basically ruining the whole ecosystem and also taking over all other entities of the island. So we also started playing a bit and thinking about this invasiveness and non-invasiveness, what is native, what is not native on this island, which is also actually an artificially formed island by human activities. And then with all these ideas, we were working 1 week and we kept on working, and we are still working on it, I think, and we will also do other exercises with students this week, and from tomorrow till Thursday we will build some prototypes of this growing architecture. And this was also the part of exhibition we had in Menų Spaustuvė, so we also presented the process of the island, how we were working there. And maybe Breg, if you can just go a bit to... And actually, 1 year after we worked on the island, we came back, and then we saw that basically almost everything we built and we saw as a spatial kind of intervention, installation, whatever, everything was almost in decay. So everything disappeared. And then we also found that it was quite beautiful because it was ephemeral and maybe it functioned for a certain amount of time. Maybe it gave space to blackberries to grow or other species to get more sun, get more wind or air or water. But we disappeared, and now we are returning with students, and I'm also not sure what is left there from the previous times we entered. So there is this cyclical and seasonal approach, and it's repeating, and then for us to come back to the same place and see what has left and what has changed, it's also quite important. And in all TAAT projects, this approach of coming back, it's very important, I think.
Yeah, so we're on. I mean, I have the feeling we're not really presenting you any design output, which we were aware of that was going to happen. Yeah, the question is, to what extent is that important? Is it more important to think about architecture and to sort of digest new ways of doing architecture, and maybe that takes long in order to then actually start making something again, or in order to prune and maintain and shift sort of the structures that you're planting? I think we're now on that point of going back and seeing what the next steps are. But maybe to maybe end a bit with an anecdote is that I remember in 2021, I think, it was our first approach to the island. Maybe this is something to give to the students that are hopefully after this talk will still able to or will be willing to join us. Is that we took a raft, a kind of second-hand Chinese raft from some cruise ship.
It was found in a kind of marketplace.
Yeah, and it didn't. We had to get air into it through a car battery and a reversed vacuum cleaner. And then we got the air in it, we all stepped in it, and then it appeared to be leaking. And it took us about 4 hours to get to the island. And I think we were collectively quite frustrated because we all had these things planned to go and to arrive on the island and to do the workshop and to do a silent walk and like very active. And be aware of the fact that we were going to make something there. And after 4 hours, like on this super slow rhythm of the river, which at the end was super meditative and welcoming, we arrived on the island and we said, we're not doing anything. So this was the conclusion of the regenerative design process, step 1. But yeah, now I think it is the point to kind of come to something a bit more structural. Let's see. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for a very interesting introduction of your work and sort of ending with some sort of linking it to the workshop that is to happen and that starts happening today. I kind of came with a question today, just from basically seeing how you present yourselves in a text, but also checking in your website. So I basically want to firstly ask about the word that you often use, gesture, which is something perhaps which is quite, let's say, not very common in architectural vocabulary, and surely this coming from this kind of performative or dramaturgical level. So maybe you could expand on what it is as opposed to what we're used to in architecture and spatial design.
Since Breg is doing a PhD on it, I will.
Yeah. And is it on? Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering where to start, because I've been doing a lot of reading on the concept of gesture. What's interesting as a philosophical concept is that it appears in a lot of different disciplines already. So for me, it's also a way to look at the practice through through a concept that is very multi-layered. And for me, I mean, there's a very nice text by Bart Verschaffelt, who is a Belgian architecture historian. And for him, the architectural gesture, what we in general see as the building as a gesture, which is for me still a bit of the hand of God, put something on the earth and then it's wonderful kind of approach. He says that it's very much about authenticity. So the gesture as an authentic action of the architect that is at some point maybe more a craftsman, that's his position, in the sense that he knows the wood that he's cutting, he knows the tree that comes from the wood that he's cutting. So the authenticity and gesture, I think, is a very important thing, or a very important relationship. And I see, I mean, around me, I mean, you just have to open Design and look at architectural projects that are being made. That the authenticity of the gesture of making in every sort of small details, but also as in architecture as a whole, that's something that we lost very much, I think, or that's at least my opinion and my feeling. So part of what we try to do in the practice is to create space to reinstall a gestural approach to design, and to start very small in me taking my hand and taking a flower by, I mean, as an example, but also in a bigger ways of taking, but especially also in relating to landscapes. And I think that's where it starts, and where it started here. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does in a sense. I think this, for me, it's very interesting in kind of, and the way you talked as well. It's kind of a double ontology, like this kind of doubling of architecture and performance, and you kind of started it like looking at the performance in this perhaps more kind of traditional sense of, writing a script and creating spatial condition, and you kind of go as you go with these projects, you kind of expand up to making with nature, for example, weaving and kind of going even away from. So that's very interesting. I have a follow-up question about, about maybe in general this vocabulary. It's a curious question of, where does it take you in the conversations about architecture? I mean, that's one of them. Again, maybe architecture is too harsh a word, but maybe spatial design is also, you kind of almost interchangeably use that. I understand that it's not kind of the same thing, but you already mentioned that, there is, somehow architecture itself is, has a lot of like these mythologies ongoing for, I don't know, like centuries of kind of this, kind of godlike approach to. And then in the way you talk, you actually, I see it to be much more about the process, and this kind of essentially shifts the question what it is that architects do, because we are kind of, at the academic level, the school usually taught that, architect design buildings and you do it by this, and that. And in your practice, it's apparent that, there's something else that you're doing, and then vocabulary that you used to describe is coming, much more performative in a sense. So I'm quite curious how, how are you, let's say, in the discussions of like these more kind of, let's say, classical architectural talks?
I'll quickly answer, and then we'll give the mic to you. There's a very nice text of Alberto Perez Gomez, who is an architecture historian, critic, and he says that actually the word architect had a different meaning in Greek drama. The architect in Greek drama was the one that was leading others into action, which I still like as a way of thinking about the architect, because there's a lot of actions that in general are being directed by the architect, the craftsman, the drawers, like everybody in the process of the design, so to say. But for me, the movement, or the collective movement, or moving with, is also in being present on site and doing a plant meditation. For me, there's also movement and gesture that, in a way, the architect is direct. Directing is then maybe not the right word anymore, but at least framing an experience in which others can move with more than human entities. So yeah, and another nice reference, I think I'm reading it now, is a text by Lefebvre on rhythmicities or rhythmologies. So he's saying that it's his last work before he died, and that he's basically saying that everything in our surrounding is rhythm, and there's arrhythmical things, things that are not like chak chak chak, and there's rhythmical things. And in between these two, there is a spectrum that you can play on as a designer, as a maker, as a choreographer, as whatever. And so the architect is for me also a rhythm analyst, so somebody that listens to the rhythms of the world surrounding us, and by design reacts on these rhythms, the rhythms of the river, the rhythms of how plants grow, the rhythm of a building. When you walk in here, there's also a certain rhythm that is installed that you can do something with and reinterpret, for instance. Sorry, that was on top of my mind, so I
It's fine. It's very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, maybe just to follow up one more thing. Maybe not to follow up, but yes, thanks for talking about Hazelnut Island. I don't know if Kypros is around. He's also a student here as a doctoral student, and he's like, let's say, this big overarching project that you're also partly involved in. It's a fascinating story behind the place. Like a good year ago, was co-curating an exhibition and also doing a research on the materials of Vilnius, and actually it is, kind of, let's say, the histories of different materials in Vilnius, and this particular part of the town is, in a sense, extremely important in the construction of the town. So, as you have already mentioned, yes, that the island itself partly artificial in order to make the flow of the river not as intense, so that kind of gets pumped. And yes, there is this massive quarry next door in Garunai, which kind of is this incredible scale, and it's actually quite recent, and it kind of. But then there was like in Vilpede, the whole kind of the territory built with different kind of different factories from precast concrete factory, so to also to the plastic factory, to also this silicate bricks and so on. And it's actually the very the kind of almost the production site of modern Vilnius, as opposed to like former production sites, for example, in Šnipiškės, where the brick earth was excavated, and also some of the stones were collected in order to build like the kind of previous versions of the town. So that's this incredible site to investigate, and also incredible like story also just to be told. Actually, it's very significant kind of architecturally and economically, and in all in all accounts about the city. The fascinating story of a boat, but I don't know, I kind of almost felt like the fact that the boat was leaking, and then you're going slow and like together with people, and it's so frustrating. I kind of imagined you had to like shuffle out it a little bit. So, and it's somehow like almost feel could be an allegory of what you are doing with kind of this weaving practice and so on. So that's actually a communal practice of whatever. There's quite a lot of like maybe even discursive talks right now, like staying with the trouble, all these kind of narratives about I don't know, maintaining and regenerating and all these things that you've presented. But we I think traditionally used to like see the endeavors of architect of designer as a kind of finalized shiny product, whether a building or interior or some thing which is kind of design and so on. And essentially in what you do, I kind of almost see this is much more about the process, but the process is not just kind of theater in the traditional sense of showing something, presenting something, but much more of looking for the ways of dealing with maybe a complexities of current stage. And I thought this in relation to the site as well, which was built this way in order to be generative, and then this kind of now, let's say, recolonization of artists and practitioners of different fields. As you say, there's a lot of kind of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary kind of conversations taking place with also scientists who recognize. I think it's very interesting and kind of symbolic as well, and also very timely and very needed to kind of shifting the talk about the practice that is needed kind of to counter. So I didn't form this as a question, but it's a sort of almost a projection in relation to what you're saying. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. It's quite well wrapped up already, I think. But yeah, regarding the boat, we didn't have a chance to row because it was really inside, it was kind of triangular shaped raft, and we were sitting inside, and one of us was a really good singer, so we were just singing for 4 hours, and the boat was keep on leaking, and happily we reached the island. But yeah, but I don't know, I didn't find it as some kind of unfortunate journey. It was still very rewarding. And I think for me what is quite important when we work with TAAT is this liquid matter of our collective, and liquidity, if there is such a noun, of people involved in this project. Because of course throughout this project we met Kypros, who has a great and radical mind in a way, but we also met, for example, biologist Emilia, who also taught us so much, just by visiting island with us. Or yeah, we have a textile maker and designer Amandine, or we have architects. We have Hertian, who comes from theater background. And I think for me and Breg, who are coming more from, let's say, traditional architectural practice or architectural education, it's quite important to have these people around us, because by having them and them bringing their own approaches and their own ways of seeing the same things, we also can expand the field of architecture, or the field how we describe ourselves as architects. So I think for me, at least, why I find important for me myself work with TAAT and continuously keep on coming and working on different projects is that opportunity to be exposed to those new ways of seeing.
Yeah, just stepping on that, because there was also Egle that played a very important role, I think, in the process. And Egle brought in for the working on Hazelnut Island, the working with willow and the weaving with willow, also because her mother has a background in it. And this brings me back to the multidisciplinarity, but also to the root of architecture that I think Gottfried Semper said that it was actually lying more in basket weaving, the root of architecture, and less in bricks and going upwards, but more about weaving with the landscape. And for me, that's also a very nice reflection on what architecture is also. It's a form of weaving with the landscape, and not so much taking something, treating it as, or baking it, and then seeing it as separate from. So I do agree that we need multidisciplinary approaches to remind us of the connectivity and the entanglement with matter, with ways of doing things, with ways of sensing, ways of perceiving the landscape. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to invite some questions from the audience, perhaps. So please, if anyone would like to. Okay. I would also ask to
That's
tell
a
your
tricky
name,
one.
Yeah. Yes.
Long.
So only now I started thinking what TAAT actually means. Took a while to raise a question.
It wasn't in the presentation, so where did you pick that up?
Yeah, but like after all the years. So I have a guess and then I have a question. So my guess is that it's theater, architecture, theater. If so, your narrative at the moment is very much focused on design, and probably very much because the two of you come from the space making background. So if GJ was telling the story, would it be more theatrical? What is now the theater approach in this? Is it still here? Is it actually, are we more on this non-extractive, regenerative conversation much more now? And the theater, and we can take off the TT and stay with AA?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we don't use the words theater, architecture, theater anymore. So I'm amazed that you picked up on that actually, because it wasn't there anymore. I thought, or maybe we said it on how do you say, without. Yeah, I think from a disciplinary point of view, also, I mean, I think we also made the presentation knowing that we're in front of a more architectural audience. I guess I'm not sure if I could do it very differently myself, but I think if Geert-Jan would be here, I'm not sure if it would be more on performance, as I mean, the last performative gathering or performative event that we did was not so much a very classical performance. So anyway, I mean, we never made work in which there was an audience in front of a group of actors. So it was already much more fluid and participatory. I think, we didn't talk about the project in Uganda, but there we're working. So we got a question from a choreographer who bought a piece of land and he wants to develop an art center with artists and residencies on his piece of land. And there, I mean, we're not going to make performance there, but I think the performativity or performance mindset there is in generating scenarios for performative events to happen, facilitated by space. So I think there it becomes more performance in the sense that it's about the design of the whole performance/art center. But purely performance work, I think we are. I'm not sure if we ever did that actually. It always has been more installation, I would say, or performative installation. But yeah, this is also kind of disciplinary lingo or something, no?
Anyone else? Yeah.
I maybe it's picking up or not. I try to still figure out. So you're doing these silent and plant meditations and in the regeneration, and I wonder who's guiding that from you, and where do you take? Because it feels like a lot of indigenous knowledge. So where do you source the guidance of these meditations? Is it you? Is it also, can it be the students because we try out something, because we found something? There I'm a little bit interested how you switch from architecture or space design in the ability to guide these performative processes. And then I was also just intrigued, it was like very fast, because these non-human entities, I think it's a very nice approach to bring it within architecture and the realizations you were doing in your trajectories. But you said something like, yeah, these non-human entities, it's like the resources. It seemed that resources, that you're starting to define that as more than human. That I quickly heard, and then I'm interested, because resources are always very much embedded in social, political, and labor conditions. And then I'm just wondering, yeah, how do you shift that in?
Maybe my articulation when I talked about resources was not very clear, but I think I said more than human entities, formerly known as resources. Yeah. Yeah, in the sense that we treated more than human entities for a very long time, and still as resources that we can take, that are at our disposal. So that's why they're formerly, I mean, I say formerly called resources, because now we have to call them differently, because we are aware of the fact that they should attain other rights, so not just being at our disposal. So I think it's already in the wording. So if we write or if we talk, I'd rather not use the word resource because it's an objectification of something that has life or that has soul or that has. So that's why we rather not say it.
But I think it's also, in a way, how we build up this presentation was also to show the switch, how TAAT saw the same thing, you know, and we showed these installations made out of plywood or bunch of beams, and we were quite frank to say that, yeah, we were not really aware where did it come from. And then little by little we started thinking, where does it actually come from? And what Breg also told before, that yeah, we feel there is a lack in architectural field in our profession, asking this question, where do things come from? Because we take them so often for granted, like this table is standing here, yeah, we like it, it's beautiful, it's a great, I don't know, radical design of someone. But where does that come from, you know? The material, how was it produced? And yeah, with TAAT, with this approach, it's really going to very kind of authentic or almost like primitive ways of doing things. I think we go a bit to the background of like the really base of how things are made. And they are not sometimes made in the most beautiful way. They are also made in a nasty way. But it's good to be aware of it.
Yeah, that, and for your question on the plant meditation, we borrowed it from a researcher that did research on plant perception. From what I know, there's no indigenous borrowings in that one. I can send you the reference if you want. Then you can check. Yeah, I mean, it's a...
Because you have sometimes biologists who comes or other experience, so I wonder whether you also work with people from the field of choreography, of performance, or who bring that in as their practice.
Yeah.
You try to figure it out yourself.
Maybe
it's not judgmental.
No, but it's good to, I mean, to stay alert also, like where we get the sources. So that's no, I think it's a very good question. Choreographers, I mean, we worked with Robert Sempija in Uganda, but he's not so much connected to the other projects. Do we have a like somebody more in movement? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for the moment we don't have. I mean, we didn't do a project with dancers, for instance, to make that very. Yeah.
Hertian, who is also a member of TAAT, like he comes from this more performative background, so I think he brought a lot of that knowledge into TAAT practice.
Yeah, and then that knowledge that somebody introduced, later you take maybe to the next trajectory, you try it again, somebody else impersonates or embody the guidance.
Yeah.
It's a sort of transmissive model of...
Yeah, we have a lot of written out scores, so it's little books that are printed that are often dispersed in education exercises with students also, but also in workshops. Yeah, and then it's every person in the collective is free to pick them up or propose his or their own model. Yeah.
And that's on the website also.
Yeah. There's a workshop section also. Yeah.
I would almost want to kind of blend the two questions in a projection. I've read from your presentation in a sense that it went from theater to performance, and this question of more than human, which you present as more than human, it's, you know, those pieces of architecture that were treated resources, somehow I see them becoming part of performance. I mean, through these practices of weaving and so on. So, I don't know, that's my projection. The short one.
Yeah, I think it would also be interesting if you commented on the leadership during the processes, because leadership or no leadership. But and I think that was also the first part of your question, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning also for the students to get ready for the next days.
Okay, I can talk about the leadership. So we don't have very clear leaders, but of course there are people who are overseeing the process. And I think at first, when I started working, Breg and Hertian, who are founders of TAAT, they were taking the lead much more. And the more we work, I feel there is a bit more, much more non-hierarchical approach towards who's leading the process. And how we now try to work, I think, with TAAT is that everyone has its own strengths, so we take the lead in certain moments. So, yeah, like we mentioned, that Hertian maybe is just has much more knowledge about this performative activity, so he brings in his knowledge on certain moment. And then I practice a lot of walking. So, for example, I like to introduce walking as a method into these workshops we do with other people. Or Breg is working a lot with gestures, so he brings this knowledge into our projects. So it's a little bit of like collective leadership, and I think we are feeling comfortable of switching the leadership among each other. And of course, with students, I think at first it will be a little bit maybe that we will be leading the workshop, but I hope that towards the end of the workshop we will also find a way how to really break through this hierarchical approach and see how everyone can find its own voice in this process, which for us it's really important in our project.
If there are no more urgent questions, I suggest that we conclude tonight and thank Goda and Breg. I think if there's anything while they're packing their computer, please ask them, and also students will have plenty of time during the workshop as well to kind of see the process and be part of that process. So thanks a lot for this very interesting presentation. I just want to maybe quickly remind that on Wednesday from 7 we are going to have second lecture this week, or 2 lectures, maybe 2 separate ones. So everyone is welcome, and please bring friends. So, and see you then.